What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, this is one of those videos I have been meaning to do for a while. Now, I've talked about Shaq and Charles before, but it wasn't specifically this topic. The only reason I got reminded to do it was that when I was in Ticket TV's live stream when he was talking about the passing of Cliff Robinson, someone in the chat mentioned Charles Barkley. Right, and I got to thinking about TNT, and it reminded me of a recent little spat that he had, Charles, with Shaq, where once again Shaq brought up the rings argument, and that argument really irks the hell out of me. Okay, it irks the hell out of me, and look, this is the thing: Shaquille O'Neal is an all-time great player. He's a top 4, I think, all-time center. To me, it's Kareem, and I would say Wilt. Then, you could argue Shaq third. I used to put Bill Russell right there. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I go back and forth with Bill, man. Sometimes, when I think about Bill Russell and off the court stuff he did, sometimes I want to elevate him more, But as an actual player, I don't know if he's worthy of. It is what it is. But that's just a touchy subject sometimes with Bill Russell. But Shaq was great, man. But he could have been greater. This is the thing I'll be saying about Shaq. Shaq had GOAT potential. Remember, at one point in Shaq's career, he had the highest PER in NBA history. The inevitable comparisons to Wilt Chamberlain. He was more dominant than Mike. Now, I'm not saying he was great, but he was more dominant than Mike as far as defensive scheming. Like, you couldn't stop him. And if Shaq had Kobe's or Mike's motor and his mindset, and if he even had, Moses Malone's work ethic, he could have been and would have been the GOAT. But he didn't quite reach his full potential. Charles Barkley exceeded his expectations. People thought Charles might be a guy that might put up 15-8, maybe 16-8. Not what he was. They didn't quite expect him to be that good in the NBA because of his size. They thought his size would hinder him, but it didn't. And the thing that always irritates me is, look, yes, historically I will rank Shaq higher than Charles Barkley because of his accomplishments. But Shaq, to me, oftentimes sells himself short when he's constantly bringing up the rings because he makes himself sound insecure about his own legacy. Right? Now, this is my thing about rings. Rings matter to me only, like, if you notice, when I talk about Michael Jordan, I almost never bring up his rings. You notice how a lot of people, when they talk about Jordan, they bring up his rings. I never bring up his rings because I don't have to do that. I can talk about other things. I can talk about his actual accomplishments, individual. I don't have to bring up rings. Only with I only bring up rings as the cherry on the top of my argument. That's it. I don't bring up rings. Shaq always brings up rings. Let me say this. Shaq, if you had been born 10 years earlier, you would have won no rings either. More likely Tim Duncan, too, if he had been born 10 years earlier. That just was the reality. Why? Because the 90s, well, first of all, the 80s was the era of Dr. J, okay? it was the era of Zeke, Magic, and Larry. And if you weren't on those teams, your ass won't go win no rings in the 1980s. And in the 90s, if you weren't playing with Hakeem Olajuwon or Michael Jordan, you weren't winning any goddamn rings. And that's why guys like Reggie Miller, that's why guys like Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and John Stockton, and possibly Alonzo Mourning, and Patrick Ewing. I say possibly because I'm not so certain about 97. 97, I don't know about that team. The Miami Heat team. They're real good, you know. I just don't know if they would have won the title. But those guys, they didn't win rings because of Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan. Period. It wasn't because they weren't great players. Those two guys monopolized the NBA hierarchy in the 90s. Straight up. And if you weren't playing with them, you weren't going to win any titles. If you noticed, Shaq did not start winning championships until those guys retired. So Shaq, if you were born 10 years earlier, like I said, you wouldn't have won no rings. You know what I'm saying? In 94, you got swept by the Pacers. Right? In 95, you got swept by the Rockets, a team that wasn't even favored to win that title. Then the next year, you guys got swept by the Bulls. In 97, I think you guys lost in 5 to the Jazz. And in 98, you got swept by the Jazz. And then in 99, I think you guys got swept by I believe it was the Kings or the Mavericks. Remember? I can't remember. I think it was the Kings. So, you consistently lost to guys who either were losing to Hakeem or you lost to Hakeem himself in 95 and Mike in 96. So you weren't winning before either. You know what I'm saying? Until those guys got old or retired. And then you played on teams that had either Kobe Bryant or Dwayne Wade. Most people consider them the second and third greatest shooting guards of all time. You know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, when Charles Barkley was with the Sixers, his best teammates were Hershey Hawkins and Armand Gilliam and, Rick Mahorn. So, I mean, you've never really been on a team where it was just you. You've always been on teams where you've had guys like Penny Hardaway, who, if not for injuries, would probably be a top 20 player. Or, like I said, Kobe or Wade. Later on, you play on a team with LeBron, Steve Nash. You've consistently played with Hall of Famers because you're a ring chaser. Okay? You definitely were a ring chaser at the end of your career. You tried to sneak one in with Boston. So, yeah, you irritate me with that shit, man. And I'm not saying the Lakers in 2000 didn't have competition. They did. They had the Kings, of course. They had the up-and-coming Dallas Mavericks. They had the Spurs. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of talent in the Western Conference at the time. I'm not saying that. But the 90s, the NBA was loaded with talent. And then another thing that irritates me is you didn't start winning until all the great big men started either retiring or fading away. The Olajuwons, the Dave Robinsons, you know what I'm saying? After that 96 injury, he was never the same player again. Ewing, you know what I'm saying? All these guys, Mourning with the kidney, all these guys started fading off, then you started dominating and winning. And in 2000 finals, you went up against, who was it? Rick Smits, a fine center. great center, not legendary. Then in 2001, he went against Dikembe Mutombo, one of the greatest defensive centers of all time, but he ain't no Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And then the last year, the Nets was one of the worst overall teams to make it to a finals. I can't even remember their big man. Was it Todd McCullough? Seriously? Meanwhile, Charles Barkley in his career was going up against power forwards. I mean, look, he was going up against the Kevin McHale's. He was going up against, you know what I'm saying, the Karl Malones. He was going up against the Derek Colemans, who ate his way out of greatness. He was going up against the Larry Johnsons. He was going up against, you know what I'm saying, the Tony McDyces. He was going up against Chris Gatlings and the Popeye Jones and the Otis Thorpes, the Horace Grants, the Dennis Rodmans. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you're going up against the centers. Sometimes he's matched up against centers. Went up against Jerome Kersey, the late great Cliff Robinson. I mean, seriously. Shaq, I mean, you really irritate me with this center shit, man. I mean, with this ring argument. It's stupid. If you had played 10 years earlier, you weren't going to win any rings. And you weren't winning in the 90s. And unlike Charles Barkley, like I just mentioned, Charles Barkley never got swept in the playoff series. Never. You got swept multiple times, Shaq. You got swept in 94 by Reggie and them. You got swept by Kareem and them in 95. You got swept by the Bulls. Mike closed you motherfuckers out in that game 4. He made sure y'all was getting swept. Y'all got swept in 98, I believe, by the Utah Jazz and Carmelo and John Stockton. And they got swept in 99. I can't remember. I always forget whether it was the Kings or the Mavericks. I want to say it was the Kings that swept y'all in 99. Had to be the Kings. So like I said, y'all didn't start winning until Phil Jackson got there and Kobe Bryant matured. They finally got Eddie Jones out there. Kobe became the full-time starter, and Phil showed that team how to win. You know what I'm saying? That's when that team became great, and that's when Shaq started winning. When Kobe elevated his game. When Dwayne Wade took that team on his back in 2006 and turned that 0-2 deficit, about to be an 0-3 deficit, around and won that title for that team. You see what I'm saying? Later on, you know what I'm saying, largely because of Shaq's lack of dominance by that time, the Bulls shockingly swept the defending champion Heat in 07. I remember that shit. So you got swept like 6-7 times. 6-7 times, Shaq. Meanwhile, Charles Barkley in the playoffs was going up against teams like the Bulls. I mean, he was going up against prime Michael Jordan. Man, Mike, please. He was going up against prime Michael Jordan in the playoffs. He was going up against, you know, great teams in the, you know, the Houston Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs in the West. When Dave Robinson was a beast, averaging 30 points and 11 rebounds and 5 blocks and 4 assists, like a gazelle up and down the court. Kim Olajuwon averaging 27 and 13 and 4 blocks and 3 assists. And man, get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Just get out of here. The best teammate that Charles Barkley ever had, in my opinion, in his prime, was Kevin Johnson, who should be in the Hall of Fame, but it's reasons why he's not. It's political stuff. Okay, Shaq, you have had all-time greats as teammates. You've had, I'm going to end the video here. The best teammate Charles Barkley ever had was Kevin Johnson. All right? The best teammate that Shaq's ever had was Kobe Bryant, followed by Dwayne Wade. Well, actually, Kobe Bryant, followed by LeBron James later on, then Dwayne Wade. Okay? You get where I'm going with that. Penny Hardaway, if it weren't for injuries, would be a top 20 player, just like Dwayne Wade. Then he had the greatest coach of all time in Phil Jackson. Then he was coached by another top 2 or 3 all-time coach in Pat Riley. So I'm done, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm done. Tell me what you guys think.